So, I recently made a video talking about Ryan Gosling and his versatility as an actor, despite the fact that a lot of people seem to think he only plays one type of character. And today, I'm going to be taking a look at two roles of his that are so similar, there is actually a theory that they are the same character. So, with that said, I'm Renelle Mason. This is Ronnie Watches Movies. Let's talk about Julian and the Driver. I'm going to start with the similarities between these characters and why there is a theory that they are the same person. The first obvious similarity is that they are both played by Ryan Gosling, and the films have the same director, Nicholas Winding Refn. But beyond that, in both movies, Gosling has very few lines, relying mostly on body language and subtle facial expressions for his performances. Both characters are quick to violence, and both have vague histories. Now, I believe the theory goes that Only God Forgives is a prequel to Drive. We have absolutely no backstory for the driver in Drive. We don't even have a name, but we can probably assume that he has a shady past. So it isn't too far-fetched of an idea that he could have been a drug-dealing boxing club owner in Thailand. However, I am not a believer in this theory, and I'm going to spend the next however many minutes explaining to you how different I think these characters actually are. First off, these characters have totally different attitudes. Though the driver might seem shy, he has a real quiet confidence to him. At the beginning of the movie, we see Driver watching Irene from a distance, seemingly longing to make a connection with her, but possibly too shy to. We even see him actively avoid her at the grocery store. But after their first interaction, and as the movie goes on, I really think it's more a fear of messing up her life than a fear of rejection that kept him away from her initially. When they have their first real interaction, Driver seems fairly confident. He may not say much, but he never seems awkward or unsure of himself. Julian, on the other hand, seems to have no confidence at all. Anytime he shares a scene with another person, he always seems to be the smallest person in the room. And you get the feeling that he doesn't want to be doing whatever it is that he's doing, but like he feels he doesn't have a choice. Except for when he's with Mai. If we look at the way Julian behaves with Mai, his love interest, sort of, he has none of the charisma in his interactions with her that the driver has with Irene. It's almost like he feels unworthy of her and like he craves her gentleness. Now, if you want to understand why Julian would feel that way about a woman, we need look no further than his mother, but we're going to touch on that in a little bit. Next up, let's look at the way that Julian and the driver use violence. Both these characters are quick to violence, but it's what provokes that violence that is so different between them. Whenever we see the driver get physical, it is always in the defense of someone that he loves. We never get the feeling that this is something that he wants to be doing, that he wants to be hurting people, but rather something that he has to do in order to keep Benicio and Irene safe. This is especially evident in the elevator scene when the driver has to protect Irene, but knows that in doing so, he will probably lose her forever. And that's the price that he's willing to pay to make sure that she stays safe. The driver is not violent for selfish reasons, and I don't really get the feeling that he wants to be a violent man at all. Now, if we look at Julian, his use of violence is almost always in reaction to someone making him feel emasculated. In this scene, Julian attacks these strangers because they interrupted his daydream, reminding him that he can't have what he wants because of his own internal issues. In this scene, he grabs Mai and yells at her because she reminds him that he doesn't have the strength to stand up to his mother. Now, don't get me wrong, I feel for Julian. The implication in this movie is that he had a truly horrific childhood. But the truth is, when it comes to his temper, he's kind of a douche. Where the driver can be seen as heroic in the right light, Julian comes across as weak and trying to compensate for it. And like I said, this makes sense for him considering his implied background, and it doesn't even make me dislike him as a character. I actually like characters who have faults. This might seem like a vague point, but I just feel like these two characters are pretty much opposites in every way. The driver is strong, Julian is weak. The driver is confident, Julian isn't. Everything about the driver feels like a choice. He chooses to only speak when he wants to. He chooses to keep the amount of people in his life to a small number. He feels in control. With Julian, it feels like everything just happens to him and like he feels helpless to stop any of it. Now, we do get more backstory for Julian than we do for the driver, which helps explain a lot about his character. Basically, his mother is the worst. Like, absolutely the worst. And it is heavily implied that she abused Julian as a child, leaving him a broken shell of a man who can't make connections. He feels like he can't even touch Mai. Julian carries so much guilt and shame around with him, and it's hard to imagine the driver coming from a place like that. Only God Forgives does end on a hopeful note, with Julian finally making a stand for himself and ultimately paying for his sins. I like to think that after this, he can move forward with a clear conscience and finally begin to heal. Now, you could argue that the driver is just Julian after a lot of therapy, but I feel like that's a lot of emotional growth to happen in a short period of time, considering everything that Julian's been through. Now, the final difference I'd like to point out between these two characters is Ryan Gosling. Ryan chose to play these characters so differently, despite how similar they might sound on paper. And it truly is a testament to his abilities as an actor that he is able to give two such wildly different performances while hardly saying a word. Being able to just stand in a room and make one character seem sure and confident and the other seem insecure and fragile while staying completely silent is insane. It's all in the way that he carries himself. His body language is where all of the character development happens. I mentioned this video that I had watched in my last Ryan Gosling video, and in it they said that Ryan is particularly talented at showing his character's true feelings despite how he's trying to appear. And I feel like both of these movies are great examples of this. Almost everything that we learn about these characters is from Gosling's physical performance alone. And he isn't just showing us how these characters are outwardly perceived, but he's also showing us the inner turmoil that's going on at the same time. The layering is just phenomenal. And I do think that this is something that Gosling is particularly talented at. The characters in both of these movies are able to be so opposite to each other, despite their many similarities, because of Gosling's skills as an actor. And if you are willing to pay attention and actually get invested in these characters, I think more people would be able to see how different they actually are. So that's about it for my thoughts on Julian versus the driver. Please give this video a thumbs up if you made it all the way to the end. I would love to hear your thoughts on these two characters down below. Do you buy into the theory that Only God Forgives is a prequel to Drive? I'd actually love to hear how many of you actually like Only God Forgives as a movie as well, because it's pretty polarizing online. Anywho, thank you so much for watching. Pretty please hit that subscribe button if you love movies as much as I do, and I will see you all next time.